when you're on.
Whenever you're ready, Michael, let me know. Michael, once again, thank you for doing all this WebEx stuff that you always do. Thank you.
No problem, no problem. Oh, you're good to go, Frank.
Thank you, Michael. I'd like to start the meeting of Wednesday, February 24th for the budget concerning budgets for the police department, the mayor's office, city clerk, comptroller, budget director, benefits and revenue. We're going to hear from the department heads on this budget during this time council. And I'd like to start turning over the meeting to Heather Mowat. So Heather, as soon as you get a chance, you can start on whatever department would you like to start with?
Okay. If we could start on page 13.
Comptroller Morehouse.
Okay.
Has joined the meeting.
Okay, we're going to start on page 13. One area I didn't think I needed to add, but since it's at the top of the page, the Common Council. Nothing unusual there. I don't know if Melissa's on the phone. Nothing unusual there. The only thing I do want to point out, something that Joe Beatrice brought to my attention last night, was that, because we're doing the YouTubes, and by the way, every time we do a video streaming, it's $75. I got our first bill about a month and a half ago, and I had to go through all the departments from E&A to planning and sort all those out. But Councilman Beatrice mentioned to me last night that we haven't had any new meetings posted on Channel 98 because we've done YouTubes, and he was curious about that. So I told him I would mention it. But I do want to say that, so any of those meetings that are associated with the Common Council and they're being streamed, they are $75 each, and they are coming out of the Common Council budget. But other than that, nothing unusual there, and I don't know if you have any questions on the Common Council budget.
So Heather, this is Councilman Beatrice again. So per our conversation last night, so is that something that going forward, I mean, they used to be 1 week behind. Now they're still doing September's meeting. And I know it's a minor thing. I just want to know, so if anybody calls and asks me, going forward, is that going to be something that's updated? Or are we just going to tell our people, all they have to do is go to YouTube and click on the meeting and they can watch it? I just want to know where we are. And you did explain to me last night that we are not getting charged through Spectrum to have that on. So it's no charge, but I just want to know what the plan is going forward.
Yeah, and that's really not up to me. I don't know if the council president wants to address that. I've not, as a city administration, we've never had involvement in how the Common Council meetings have been presented. So I don't know, Mr. President, if there's something you want to say, or if Melissa's on the telephone.
What was that? Sorry, I was calling a few other people that were trying to get in. If you want to just restate that real quick.
Sure.
Okay, so on Channel 98, our council meetings were always on there. They were always like a week or 2 weeks behind. Right. Ever since we've gone to the YouTube, which is more customer friendly, and I think it's great. There's still
I already got an answer for you. There's an actual legitimate issue with the TV station right now, and Paul Buckley's working on fixing it. That's the real answer. So I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Buckley had nothing to do with that, so I would have called Paul. But I was informed that Paul Buckley had nothing to do with any of that. So, okay. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. Okay. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So our next cost center is Mayor. I don't know if anybody has any questions as it relates to this cost center. Okay. Next cost center is Comptroller. A couple of things. I know Comptroller Morehouse is with us. A couple of things I just want to mention. As we talked a little bit about last night, there was one raise in his department. It was for Diana Corey. And that was, it kind of goes back to the mayor and the comptroller right sizing positions, not necessarily people, but positions. And the only other thing I do want to mention as it relates to this budget has to do with our ticketing system. Right now, there's a separate software that we utilize, the police department utilizes to issue tickets. That software is no longer going to be supplemented by the software provider. And so Frank Matolo worked with our police department and with our controllers department, and we found that Munis, which is our general ledger software system, that they do offer a parking tickets module. And so we did purchase that this year, or we're about to purchase it for about $80,000, I think it is actually. But we do have additional money in the contractual because we are going to have to provide support for that service. But other than that, there really wasn't much of a change in the controller's cost center. And Comptroller Morehouse, I don't know, do you have anything else you'd like to add before we open up for questions?
No, I think we're getting our hands around the parking, and that's really going to help to be on Munis, and people can pay online then. And no, be happy to take any questions, I guess.
And I do want to mention, as we talked about last night, when we offered the early retirement incentive, one of the individuals, the positions that took the early retirement was the individual that was accepting parking tickets and reconciling parking tickets. The Comptroller's office was kind enough to take over that function this year, which was just a huge help to our budget. So he absorbed it within his cost center. So there's really, if you kind of look at it from a bigger picture, there's, the Comptroller's office was able to provide cost savings to the city general's fund, and that's why he is now managing it. So I'd like to open up. Does anybody have any questions for myself or Comptroller Morehouse as it relates to the Comptroller's cost center?
No, Heather, it's Jack. Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, okay. On that ticket program, the parking ticket program, we already approved that in the E&A, and I think that did go before the council, I think. Mike, did we put that in front of the council?
I think we already did, yeah.
Yeah, that was like last month. So
Did we?
yeah.
Yeah, we passed it.
Yeah, we passed that through the E&A. I'm not sure if we presented it to the council yet, though.
No, I think it went through the council as well. I'm logging into my email to make sure it's not the next meeting, but I thought that already went through the council as well.
I think it did too. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to let everybody know if it looks familiar, that is because we already have passed that. That was with the current software program that we already have, which made it really it fit together well, and would have saved us a ton of money because of that. So I just want to mention that. I'm all done. Thanks.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Comptroller Morehouse.
Thanks. Everybody have a good night.
Thank you. I'd like to continue on page 15 as it relates to the Budget Cost Center. As I mentioned last night, there were several individuals, several positions, the mayor.
Comptroller Morehouse
has left the meeting.
Several positions that the mayor provided for an increase. One of them was the budget director. I have taken on additional duties. We are going to be having a retirement in late spring, and I'm going to be taking over some of the insurance-related duties. There are a variety of other things. So I don't know if anybody has any questions for me. I'm happy to answer them.
God bless you, Heather.
Try to be responsive.
Thank you for everything you do, Heather. You've done a great job for us since you came aboard, and I'm happy that we can keep you.
Well, thank you. And I'm really happy to be here. I've enjoyed my couple of years. It seems like it's a blink of an eye. There's so much going on, and it's exciting to be here working for you all. So, okay. All right. If we're all set there, can we move on to page 17? On page 17, we have the city clerk's budget. Just want to mention, I don't know if Melissa's on the phone with us. She is. One of the things I want to mention is that Melissa did have a reduction in her staff lines by one, I believe, a clerk position. And they have done an excellent job in getting through the pandemic this year when City Hall has been closed, trying to facilitate permits, birth certificates, marriage certificates, dog licenses. And her deputy, Dave Butler, together, Melissa and Dave have done a fantastic job at improving technology opportunities in the city clerk's office, and we've all enjoyed that. So I don't know if you have any questions for me or for our clerk, Melissa.
I have a question, Heather.
Okay.
Mark Williamson here. I'm curious. The city clerk. When was the last time she had something other? Because she's non-union, other than the COLA raise that everybody else gets. It seems like she's left out of the department. Is she considered the department head or no?
I guess that question is answered by different people different ways. Is she labeled as a department head per se? No. Is she treated as one? Yes. Does she come to our staff meetings? No. I don't believe that she's been invited to the staff meetings. Doesn't mean she can't attend. I just don't think that, she's not managed by the mayor. She's managed by the Common Council. Last year, she received a 3% raise. She had just started, and that was what department heads were receiving. This year, department heads across the board received a 2%, and I believe she went up. I'd have to take a look, but I am almost positive that she did get that 2% along with her deputy. All non-union people were increased by 2%. As it relates to anything above that, that is really up to the council. That is a cost center that's pretty much managed by you.
Okay, so the question I have, that since she hasn't rehired somebody else, since she streamlined the process down and saved the city money at the clerk's office, should she be entitled for a little extra since she saved us so much money?
That's really up to your council, to make that decision and to convene. If you feel that, yeah.
Okay.
Hey,
I'll
Heather.
talk to the council on that.
Hey, Heather, this is Councilman Beatrice. I don't have, I'm actually in my vehicle, so I don't have the booklet in front of me, but I've read it up and down. And I've seen, isn't there something in there under the Common Council where there's a secretary there? Can you explain that role to me? There's a secretary for the Common Council?
There is, and I'm going to leave that up to the clerk. I believe she's on the phone. If she wants to explain the interaction between that position, the council, and her office. Melissa, can you respond to that?
Yes, I'm on. So the secretary, it was originally a position, a job title, and it was the secretary to the Common Council, and that was Bianca. So that is Bianca, and she gets paid out of the Common Council's budget. I believe she was union. This was before I came down here. It was a union position. I don't know, Heather, maybe if you know more about that as far as like the testing and what happened, but there was with the previous clerk, I guess they got her to where she was no longer union. So they just changed the original job description from secretary to the Common Council to just secretary. So she's no longer union, but her salary does come out of the Common Council budget.
Okay, so can I just ask, like, anytime I need anything, I call you, I call David, you guys do a great job, you take care of anything. What does this secretary to the Common Council do?
Well, like I said, previously her job description was secretary to the Common Council, and I don't believe that she did do anything when she was. I think it was just a union title, and it was filled, but they then changed it to where it's non-union. So now she's just a secretary to me. So she is basically doing the front desk of all the licensing and everything that comes within the clerk's office. So she doesn't do anything for the Common Council.
Okay, but she's there to help you, and there's a person that's there that helps you, and she's proactive for you, and it works out fine.
Yeah, so she's one of the clerks that handle the front desk and anyone that comes in the building into the clerk's office. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question.
Okay.
The Brango here. Who decides to make it non-union if it's already a union position? Did the union agree to it?
I believe, again, I wasn't the clerk, but I believe at that time, I believe they did involve Steve Price and they did work something out where they eliminated the union position.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for the city clerk cost center? Okay, can we move on to page 23, which begins the police department? Just want to mention that Captain Mickle retired this year, this past year. Captain Sinquay took over.
Has left the meeting.
It's been a great experience working with Captain Sinquay. We communicate pretty effectively, and it's been a pleasure working with the police department this year. We have few problems, and just going through the budget, you know, we tried not to meet too often in person. We were able to do everything over the web, through emails, and the police department this year for the 2021 budget, similar to the fire department, have really helped a lot in trying to keep expenses down. As you recall, when the pandemic hit, we just didn't know how we were going to end the year. And so the police department's been a great partner with the mayor in trying to make sure that only those things that had to be purchased were purchased. We still have some things we need to do for investment purposes and training, and some other things that we put off temporarily. But as you know, we go through the different cost centers, you'll see that they've done everything to really reduce their numbers. As it relates to the police administration on page 23, you'll notice, and I actually talked to the chief about this, on page 24, you see the totals, and it appears on first blush that the revised budget is actually, for the 2021 year, is actually more than what the mayor and E&A approved budget is by $200,000. And what you're going to see, and E&A understands this because every year, you know, when we go to do budget transfers, and I believe we went to the council last year because they were significant. Throughout the year, the police department is moving personnel between different cost centers for a variety of reasons. And the prior budget director would go to E&A every time an individual was moved, try to estimate how much of their salary to move. And as I took over, I had a discussion with E&A that we would do it at the end of the year because it was just, we were having meeting after meeting to move people around. So as you look at this, that was the one thing, that kind of stuck out. You'll see some cost centers salaries much higher, some are much lower, and it really is just really a function of moving people around. I will say that for the union contract expires on March 31st, 2021, so that's in a little over a month. Negotiations will begin shortly on that contract going forward. They do pay 20% right now towards their health care. And so I just want to start, as I mentioned on page 23, as it relates to police administration. And then I will open it up for questions for the police department.
Hey Heather, it's Tad Noonan. Can we just do a sound check? Make sure you're able to hear.
I can hear you. We can hear you.
All right, thank you.
So Chief, I don't know if you would like to just have some opening remarks, and then we can open up for questions on the different cost centers.
As we know, it's been a challenging and interesting year. I mean, whoever thought we'd be in the midst of a pandemic and working through it. But, very early on, like Heather said, there was an austerity budget in place. I think it was put in place as early as early April, and we were asked not to spend. I got to say, the working relationship between Captain Sinquay, Heather, and myself has been outstanding. I mean, though we've made a concerted effort not to spend, whenever we had needs, specific needs, or emergency spending, Heather's always found a way to make sure that we came up with those funds. So, Heather, I just want to thank you for that, and it's been a pleasure actually working with you.
Okay, so as it relates to page 23, police administration, council people, do you have any questions for the chief and his team?
Yeah, Heather, Chief, I got to ask you a couple things. Do you guys anticipate getting that? Obviously, you want some more vehicles and equipment, right?
Always.
All right, where is that in this budget? Because we're going to be meeting with the controller, and this famous thing is, well, you approved the budget, now we have to pay for it. So I just want to see what you're looking for as far as equipment. That's all.
Yeah, usually it's vehicles. Keep in mind, our police vehicles are running 24/7, 365. So they're not your typical motor vehicles. Traditionally, when we need vehicles, we always go through a lease buy program, where at the end of the lease, we buy back the vehicle for $1, which we keep. A lot of those cars after they're replaced, they're usually filtered down either as spare cars or they go to other units. I know that there has been some proposals out there, and what other agencies have done, they looked into a leasing program with some of these national rent-a-car companies, and I guess that's something we can look into in the future. But again, I mean, the only problem with the leasing program, you do not, with the national rental companies, you don't own the vehicles after the lease is over.
Yeah, let me ask you. Yeah, I agree, because those cars are, obviously on the road 24/7. They're running constantly. Understood. So leasing may not be the way to go. I don't know that. Whatever's financially best, I guess. But did you ever consider hybrids or electric vehicles or anything like that? Has it been considered?
We have. Matter of fact, Councilman Friend had brought up an article that she saw from an agency, I believe, in California, with Teslas. That's something that we are currently still looking at. We know that there will be some challenges to using electric vehicles, because you'd have to have multiple charging stations. The work on these vehicles would not be very easily done by our own mechanics, because now you're not dealing with your typical engines, you're dealing with basically batteries that can possibly explode if you don't have the training and the expertise to do it. There are other factors that we have some concerns about, but in the end, what we are looking to, we need to talk to that agency in California to see how they're doing it. They're a much smaller agency than we are, but for us being a larger agency, it could, I can't say it could be a fit right now.
All right, thanks. I just want one other
Can
question.
I speak up here?
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Frank. Oh, wait.
You want to talk about the vehicles? Go ahead, because I had a question on a different subject. Go ahead.
And just to mention, we do have
okay.
vehicles we're testing out.
Yeah, I just want to jump in there quickly to say that the electric vehicles are harder, as the chief says, to service. Like, we can't service them necessarily in-house, but electric vehicles in general just don't have to be serviced as much because they don't have the same number of moving parts, right? It's not an internal combustion engine. I would like us to at least sort of move towards having a trial run. If we could think about having 4 or 5 of our vehicles be Teslas, and maybe they would be specifically for criminal investigation division or something like that. I do think that this really, the world is going to head in an electric car direction, whether we like it or not. I'd love to see us out in front of that. Thank you. Thanks.
And we can certainly look into a program like that.
Thank you, Chief. One other question. I believe we approved the position for, hold on one second. I saw it in here and I can't find it right now, but hold my thought. Okay, just hold on. I got to research it.
Frank, can I ask a question? This is Jack. Hello?
Frank Miola's running the meeting. Yeah, go ahead, ask him.
Can anybody hear me?
Yeah, we can hear
Yeah,
you.
we got you, Jim. What's up?
Okay, because I'm not on my regular computer, that's why. Chief, I had a question. Have you put out exactly what equipment you're going to be asking for this year, the amount of vehicles and everything like that? Have you laid it out?
So I'd like to answer that, because right now we're in the middle of preparing a capital plan. Next Wednesday, I haven't had a chance to speak to Council Majority Leader McNeil yet. We wanted to ask if we could approach the council with our tentative plan for capital purchases. We're not introducing legislation or asking anyone to introduce legislation, but we want to come down and present. That was part of our plan from last week, talking a little bit about the state of some of our assets. So if you wouldn't mind, Councilman, if we could just wait until next Wednesday, I think a list.
We'll have a list of what vehicles are going to be and what guns are going to be purchased.
No, guns are purchased right out of the operating budget. Vehicles are purchased.
Is it all in there, what you need?
We'll be presenting, as long as Councilperson McNeil is fine with putting us on the agenda.
So you're telling me you really don't want to answer this question?
I'm not ready to answer it. I'm happy to answer any question, but I don't have a list in front of me because we're still working through it.
Well, the chief should know how many vehicles he's going to buy, not you.
Heather, you can either present, if there's no room at the pre-meeting, you're welcome to present at the main meeting as well during the departmental reviews on the meeting at the 3rd. I'll just take care of that right now. Okay?
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you. Yeah, and I just want to mention, so we sit down and we go through things and try to figure out if there's ways to buy other things. If every department came and we just presented whatever they presented, we probably have double the amount of debt that we have right now. So one of the things we do, we go through, we take a look at years of vehicles, we kind of ferret through all that so that when we get to you, we all have a consensus on at least the answers. We not all agree, but we know the facts as they're stated, and we all agree. So that's what we want to present to you on Wednesday.
All right. My only thought on this is that, I mean, this is part of the budget, figuring out what the budget's going to be for the year. I just don't know why we don't do that before the budget gets sent to us. I mean, I know they're a little late on the money, but we have no guesstimate about what we're going to get or anything like that.
Well, every year, the past couple of years, we've looked at about $350,000, which I believe is about 7 vehicles. Each year we take a look at that, but you have to go back in time. If 5 years ago we purchased 10 vehicles, and 10 vehicles are coming off because those vehicles are deemed surplus because their transmissions aren't working, they're aging out, do we add 10 more vehicles? So when you say, well, what have we always done? Every year is a different question. And so that's what we try to get to the answer so that the chief isn't there and I'm there and the chief's saying one thing, I'm saying another. We just get it down to a common set of facts and then we come to you and for your final decision.
So Chief, how many vehicles are you going to need this year?
What are you sitting on? 7.
All right. Thank you.
One other question I have.
Heather, this is Councilman Beatrice. So can I ask now you guys, Jack got me going here. He's asking about vehicles. And I'm reflecting to last week's meeting when you showed us all the pictures between the firehouse and the police department, what they need repairs. Obviously, that's going to be included on top of this too. Is that already stuff that's in this budget or that's over and above?
That's over and above. We're in the middle of pulling together the capital budget, which includes repairs and rehabilitation of some of our facilities, as well as equipment and vehicles.
And Councilman Beach, just to clarify something, every year, our vehicle purchases do not go in the regular budget. They've always been capital lease purchases.
Chief, I understand that, and I'm just asking questions because I'm kind of just learning still. So my point is, out of all of this, when we say we have a 0% tax increase, and we're going to come back with all that, how does that affect this budget? Is basically what I'm trying to say.
Okay, and that's a great question.
I want to give you everything I can give you. Okay, and you guys know that. I want to know when we're coming out and we're all over the media that we got 0% tax increase, and now all of a sudden on Wednesday, you're going to come and you're going to say you need 7 vehicles, and I'm sure you do, and your cell block is a mess, and we need to fix that, and we have the firehouse that's collapsing over here, and we want to do all this stuff. So when we agree to do all this stuff, does that come out of this budget, or where does it come? I'm asking. I'm a new councilman. I went through this last year. I'm going through it now. I want to be good at this. So Please forgive me if I'm bothering anybody. I'm asking the questions that I want to know the answers to.
No, that's no bother, and it kind of goes back to what I provided last week as a memo to the council, which showed the present outstanding debt. And I can provide you an amortization schedule, what the debt payments are in future years. Part of what we try to do is to keep our annual debt payments somewhat level. Now, if in 3 years our debt payments go up $1 million because we borrowed too much this year or too much last year, then all of a sudden your general fund budget goes up by $1 million in debt service payments, and we either have to find other places to cut, other revenue to fill that bucket, or we have a tax increase. So part of what we're going to be talking about on Wednesday is what we're asking for and how we're going to pay for that in the future. So the answer to your question is the debt service for the present year is built into the general fund. And if you go, when we get to down near the end of the budget actually, but if you get to page 54, you will actually see a transfer to debt service. And you can see it going up a little bit, you can see it coming down. And so what you try to do is you try to level that off so you don't have a big increase or a big decrease in the year, because then that throws your whole budget off for the following year. And so it's chemistry. It's sitting there and trying to estimate what you're doing. And then the second part of it is a building often has a useful life between 15 and 30 years. And what does that mean? That means you pay back over 15 years, just like paving. Paving has 15 years. Vehicles usually have 5 years. So after 5 years, the police vehicle is deemed, at least from the books, we paid the vehicle off, and it's deemed that it's to its useful life. So if you only buy, in a capital plan, you only buy vehicles, that debt is only going to be spent over the next 5 years. If you borrow for buildings and no vehicles, that may be 15 to 30 years. So it's this going up and going down and trying to estimate what those debt payments are going to look like that we try to work through. Don't always get it right, but we do try, because then on top of that, are we banning? And if we ban, we don't have to pay we don't have to pay a principal payment for 2 years. Are we going straight to a bond? If we go straight to a bond, we do pay a principal payment every year. So, we kind of work that through our fiscal advisor out of Albany to try to keep those things level. I don't know if that really answers your question, but I tried.
Yes, you did. You answered my question very much so. But going through all this, when we're looking at all these positions that are vacant and there's these numbers, and believe me, you guys all know me, the last thing in the world I ever want to do is see anybody lose anything, a job or anything. But that's why I ask a question like Common Council Secretary. That's $30,000. I never even knew we had one. Okay, so I just want to get that clear. I'm not saying it's not a good position. I'm not saying it's a bad position. I'm asking the question. And if you go through that whole budget line, and I'm just learning it, and it's kind of confusing to me, but there's a lot of vacant stuff. So am I wrong in asking that question? That there's positions that we have here, that there's money allotted in this budget that instead of borrowing, can't we use some of this, or we're not? I don't understand how it works. Okay, that's the only reason I'm asking you that.
Okay, so I'll try to just give you a quick answer to that. So sometimes we have positions that are open or vacant because we're looking for the right person. Like, I'll give you a great example. In infrastructure, we have an opening for a mason. So we've been actively looking for 2 years for a mason. If we take that position and we get rid of it, and we say, we haven't found him in 2 years, so we're going to get rid of the position. We use that money for something else, and then we find the mason that we desperately need. Okay, then we have to come back and try to find the money because now we've spent it. I will mention to you, as I mentioned, going back to the police department, it expires 3/31/2021. Our fire department contract has been 3 years expired. Our DPW contract is now 1 year expired. CSEA expired last April 1st.
Tell the mayor to get to the table. Get to the table, mayor, if you're listening.
Yep. So the mayor has been actively engaged in those discussions, but as part of these positions, that allows us the flexibility to then pay some of these contract negotiations. So I'm not saying that's what it's used for. I'll give you a great example. We have some vacancies right now in our parking administration department. Why is that? That's because when the pandemic hit, they were all part-time positions. Nobody was parking in our parking garages. Nobody. Right now, we're still, the parking lot that's over by the county building that's usually filled with state and county employees, they're still not back at work. So do we have an employee sit there with nothing to do, or do we lay him off? And that's what I actually think we reduced his hours. We didn't actually lay him off, but we reduced his hours. So we have several positions that we're waiting for people to come back when there's work for them to do. So there's a myriad of reasons we don't leave these positions open so that we can have all this extra cash in our budget. Each one has its own reason.
Okay.
Heather, getting back to what Councilman DeBrango just said, didn't we settle with the fire, where we have a proposal to the firemen as of yesterday? So that's a good thing, correct?
It is. There is a 2-year settlement negotiation that I believe was, I know because I've been told by outside parties, so I'm not sharing anything that's inside to the negotiations per se, but that's on the table with the fire department. It's yet to be seen if their membership will vote to approve that. I hope that they do. But we keep moving forward and trying to meet with the unions and move forward on negotiations.
Okay. With that being said, I got my thought back as far as a grant writer. I know we approved a grant writer position for the police department. I believe it was last year. And Heather, when you sent out the original budget, you had everybody's name in it at that time. But at that time, under the grant writer position, I believe it was a $45,000 a year position. I'm not sure. But there was no name attached to it. Has that been filled?
It has not. It has
not been filled. Okay.
No, and we and the chief can probably talk about this a little bit. I will say we had a very difficult time through the past 9-10 months trying to hire people. The case in example, it was last night talking to Chris Pastorelli and trying to find someone to hire to be the commissioner of Section 8. We've struggled with getting applications in, even though we've advertised through Indeed and then all the normal channels of posting and emailing on the county's website and in different areas. So, we definitely want to hire someone for that. And that's we want to get a police officer back on the street. That was one of the mayor's major goals last year. But there again, it goes to, there are certain types of positions that aren't easily fillable. I will mention that Council President Galimi had mentioned to us, or to me, could we share that position with the fire department? And we'll hear a little bit tomorrow night from Chief Ingersoll that they have several employees that are active in specific grant writing for the fire department. But Chief Williams, is there anything you'd like to add to this as it relates to the grant writer?
Yes, as we know, the position was approved in April. We asked about filling the position. The mayor asked us to hold off based on the situation with COVID and the concern over the budget, so we held off. The goal is to take the officer that we have doing this full time and put him back on the street. I will tell you this much: we do manage right now 12 grants. It varies. Sometimes the amount is higher. Applying for grants is one thing. What we find is the managing of the grants that is really becomes the real work of getting grants. In addition to that, the officer that currently does the job right now does a fantastic job, because it's not only grants, he's also assisting with the budget, he's paying bills, he's processing purchase orders, and I could probably leave all other duties as well, but it's definitely a full-time position.
I would certainly hope that they would fill it this year, this budget year coming up. Obviously, an extra police officer on the street would be, an asset, obviously. It's already budgeted. It's in the budget. I would hope they do fill it soon.
Okay.
How Now,
Councilman
is that
DeBrango, do you
here, say 45,000?
Yes. Councilman DeBrango, do you have any other questions? I only said this cost center, but I mean, we're kind of bouncing all around, so I don't know. Do you have any other questions?
No, that is it. That was my last question. Thanks.
Okay.
Hey, Heather, we can't hear you if you're talking.
I was muted, sorry. We moved on to Police Administrative Division. There again, nothing new or unusual here in the cost center. Once again, Captain Sinkway really scrubbed the numbers, looked around what was in different cost centers. Is there any questions for the chiefs or his team on police administrative? Next up, we have police uniform. As you can see, this was one of the cost centers under salaries on page 26 that went up a little bit. It kind of goes back to moving some of the people around, employees around. There again, I don't believe there was anything that unusual. The holiday and overtime pay kind of is a percentage of the salary number, so that's why those are also increased a little bit over the previous year. Does anybody have any questions for the chief and his team on police uniform? Okay, police CID, once again, this one's actually reduced a little bit. Nothing unusual here for the year. Don't know if you have any questions as it relates to CID. Further down on page 27, we have UPD Special Services. This one I did reduce for the year. This has to do with some of the services we provide some private entities, the auditorium, some of the games that we do, some of the parades that we do. There's some reimbursement for that. But we expect that we're not going to see as much as expenses we historically see here. So that's why I budgeted $140,000 after talking with the different chiefs. As we go down past page 27, you see various grants that you don't see any budgets in. That's simply a function of the majority of the grants that the department receives throughout the year aren't on the same timetable as our budget. So as they come through, the revenue and expenditures proceed to the Board of E&A, and they're called Supplemental Appropriations. And that's where they're budgeted and put on the books at that time. On page 31, you see court security. Once again, after talking with Donna Linsky from our court system, talking with our chiefs, just because of where we are in the pandemic historically, I wanted to make sure that we didn't budget too much of an expense here that we're not gonna see. So that's reduced. You'll also see on the revenue side when we get there that the revenue number is reduced. On page 32, we have city court. City court doesn't have a lot to do necessarily with our police department. Once again, I want to mention something because we had something new happen this year for our city court. We had an early retirement incentive taken advantage of by an employee for city courts. That it was actually a city employee, but they reimbursed us for it. We sat down with the city courts, with the court system, and found that we could utilize our maintenance staff at the police department to also assist the court system. They do a lot of carrying of books and records, and it's not just maintenance and cleaning, because they do have their own cleaning service, but maintenance. As for example, we have a new city judge this year, and our maintenance team from the police department went and made sure that we got his office up to snuff for him. But what we found was that instead of having an actual employee just dedicated to the court system that we could utilize and then charge back to the grant, because we're given a grant for city court for police maintenance. And so we've actually probably we're going to save about $35,000 this year maybe even a little bit more with benefits. And that's all due to the early retirement and then us sitting down with Steve Price, with our chief, the police chief. Can we utilize his services for the courts? And that's another game changer for us this year for efficiency, and trying to streamline and bring FTEs down if there's a way to do that reasonably. Continue on, a couple more pages for grant money. And then really the last police expense item is on page 34. One of the areas that we're required to do as a municipality is to provide crossing guards for our school children. As you can see on page 34, there was no expense this year because the kids haven't been going to school. I did put it in there. As we know, they're going to go back to hybrid in the next couple of weeks. But I felt it responsible that we do put that in there. And that really kind of ends the police department expenditures.
Quick question from Jack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Chief, do you show a line or anything for recruiting and retention or anything like that? Do we got a budget line for that?
We don't have a specific budget line. We use, I think we use what's the budget line we used in the past? Hang on one second. According to our budget guide, we use different lines depending where we find the money.
Say again, over.
This year we used our education line because we weren't spending a lot of money, but we don't have a specific line just for that.
I would think that'd be a good line to put in. That way, you know how much money you could spend every year on recruiting and develop it from that. So, hey, listen, the biggest problem with our PD is our recruiting right now. So, I wouldn't have any problem if you put some money in that recruiting line if you made one and go out and continue with your aggressive recruiting that you're doing now. That's the lifeblood department here, and we need to bring people in. I know there's programs you can put together and things like that we've talked before, and so I wouldn't mind seeing a line there for that. And so it really goes to where it should go.
No, I agree. It's just the problem is it's widespread. It's just not Utica. It's every police department in New York State and nationwide, all having difficulties hiring people of color. And it's not helping right now. It's national narrative about policing right now.
I know.
Treating numbers down.
Well, that's why it's that more of an issue. Then that's what that much more important. That, we get out there in front of people because the people that want to be a police officer nowadays or any type of law enforcement, it's dwindling. So you got to be the one, the tip of the spear, the one that they want to go after. That's all I'm saying. I just want to help you guys out if I can.
Just a quick question, Chief. Chief, while you're there, I know we just hired a class, right? Recently, and they're still in training. Are we up to snuff on the numbers? Are we down? We lost a couple. What's it?
Well, we have 4 vacancies right now, but we got 10 people out of the police academy, but they can't drive solo right now because they're currently under their field training officer program. So we're probably looking at another 3 to 4 weeks before those officers can go solo, and then we're probably looking at hosting another police academy, probably in June or July of this year. Right now, like I said, we'll have to fill 4 vacancies. The good news is that the new civil service list that we got back, we're seeing a lot more minority candidates, black candidates in particular. So we're hoping that we're going to have a very diverse hiring class this time around.
Thank you.
Can I say something? I just want to repeat what Jack was saying. I like the idea of using some of that extra fund that we have left over into recruiting. And I know that it's everywhere, but maybe like all the more reason for us to spend some more money in thinking outside the box in terms of how we recruit. I'd like to see active inside Proctor High, if that's possible. And I don't know if extra resources would make that possible. Thank you.
I will say this, the only reason why we had extra money, we actually took it out of our training line. We're likely not gonna have that training line, money available again for this next budget year, because training's to be key, keeping up with police reforms. But, wherever we find the extra funds, we do use it for recruiting. We have done billboards, we've done radio advertisement, we have done television advertisement. So, but we're also going to be looking outside the box to see if there's any other programs that we could, and again, local colleges is another area that we target for recruiting. So we are trying, but I'm open to any ideas about recruiting.
One other thing, I did make a mistake. I said we were all done with the cost centers. There's one more on page 35. I always forget this one. This is the parking enforcement and animal control, which the police department manages this cost center. I just want to say, going back to, I don't know who asked the question, maybe Councilman Beatrice. There was a vacancy in this department for about 6-7 months. And because it's difficult to find with our pay rates, someone that can do parking enforcement and also have a skill set with animal control. We've recently found that person, and the chief, is actively recruiting and found the person. They did get hired. And so I don't know if you have any questions as it relates to parking enforcement and animal control for the chief.
Yeah, Chief, I've been very, very supportive of your department. And getting back to the recruiting part that we talked about, I would think with the residency that we fought for and got passed, that would help out a lot. That was the main reason that we passed that. So I'm hoping that works. Getting on to a different topic with the animal control, and I'm not sure if it's going to be your department or if we're going to be dealing with codes. We need to do something with the feral cats. We all know about it. I came up with numerous plans, and every time it goes to Corporation Council, they push it back and nobody wants to talk about it. But it's a serious issue for our people, and we need to take care of it. And we all need to join in together and try to work on it. And I totally understand that there's a no-win situation here. And I've came up with plans. I sent it to the judge. It goes up to Corporation Council. It kicks back. They can't do it yet when other areas are doing the same thing. And I'm not sure if I'm talking at the wrong time right now, but maybe I'll wait to the codes part. We need to put some extra money in this, and we need to take care of this problem. This is something I brought up in March, and I've kind of I've kept it there because I've had different solutions. It's a very, very difficult solution, and I've talked about it over and over. I've received more calls and complaints on this situation than I have on anything that I've dealt with in the 16 months that I've been a councilman, or if it's 14 months or whatever. But we really need to come up with a solution on that to do something. So, and I know we've always worked together on it, but I just wanted to bring that point out in front of everybody while we're talking about that. Okay?
Councilman Beatrice, if I could talk to those 2
I
points.
second that as myself too. I concur with Joe Beatrice on that. We've been dealing with this too long. We need to figure out what we're gonna do. There was times when I know Celeste brought it up. We're going to have a committee. We're going to get on it. Nothing happened. I've talked to Delvin. He agrees with me. I brought ideas to the judge. The judge always works with me. He's there anytime I call him. But yet, when he brings it up to the Corporation Council, they shoot it down. Yet these other areas, the same legislation, are doing this. But it seems like nobody wants to help us with this problem. And it's a problem. Everybody turns their back. And you know what? We're all on this call. We're all political figures. And we know that's a hot bet. We're in an election year. We know when you bring it out, people are going to be mad at you. But it's a problem. We need to take care of it for the people. And I can't be the only one out here fighting against everybody. And I'm not trying to, I'm an animal lover. We need to work on this. This is something we need to work on. And that's all I'm trying to say.
If I could just address those 2 concerns. As far as the relaxing the residency law, I tell you where it's helped us the most is actually retention. We did have several officers who were prepared to leave. And once we relax those restrictions, we actually were able to retain officers. Getting back to the
You have lost, Chief, and you know I'm a big ally of you more than anything. But I also have noticed you've lost. Not that you've lost. They didn't leave from the department, but we've lost a lot of people that have moved out of the city since then too, which is okay. They did their 5 years. It's in their right, but I get it. So I'm glad that it's working. I'm just hoping that it's going to help us get new people in, because that was my objective of pushing the whole legislation through.
Again, it's a matter of both recruiting and also keeping. But let me address the feral cat problem. The true solution to the feral cat problem is going to be trap, neuter, spay, and release. That's the bottom line. I'll tell you right now, there was an issue that happened off the city hall that I was not aware of until afterwards. The city engineer, Mike Mahoney, was complaining about 2 feral cats that were in the city parking garage. Unbeknownst to me, he had our animal control officers track both of those cats. So now the question comes, what do we do with those cats? So we brought them to the Humane Society. They refused to take them because they're wild cats, wild animals, right? So left us one alternative, and that was to euthanize those cats. And I don't think we want to be in that business. So having said that, you got to keep in mind, we have animal control officers who also have dual duties as parking enforcement officers. And what they're really trained for is dogs. So the term animal control is deceiving. They're not trained to deal with wildlife or cats. It's basically dogs.
And you know what? I agree with you 100%. That's what the problem is, but we need to come to a solution. Do we need to get money out of the budget to put it someplace? When you say trap, neuter, and release, you're not doing anything by trap, neutering these cats and bringing them back. Are we going to?
Councilman Beatrice, I don't think it's up to the police chief to decide. Corporation Council's got to get up and they got to stand firm on something that you're recommending. So I think when we come to corporate council, we'll hammer them on this issue and hopefully we can get it done.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman. I agree with you 100%. I'm just trying to stress my point. It's been a year, and no matter what I try to do, it gets knocked out. I agree.
It's nerve-wracking. I agree 100%.
Yeah. So that's my only point, Councilman. Thank you.
Okay, is there any other questions for the police department, or does Chief, you and your team have anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think we're good. The only thing I'd like to add is that obviously everybody knows we're going through police reform, and police reform basically amounts to another unfunded mandate from the state. Obviously, some of these reforms are going to cost money. We've done our best to keep those the cost of the reforms low, but we're still not done. We have a draft right now, and we still have 3 public hearings and a common council meeting as well on those reforms. So I'm hoping that the state does make some funds available to reimburse cities to implement these police reforms, but that remains to be seen.
Council, are there any other questions for the chief and his team?
Yeah, I have a question, Mark Williamson. I think I'd like to see the chief and the deputy chief in a Prius, for their next car. Maybe that'll save on some money. I think it'd be a great idea. Celeste might be onto something. I think the chief and the deputy chief should be in a Prius. I think that'd be a great idea.
Besides, it'd be a clown show, but maybe we'll try a Tesla instead.
You have to cut
They're pretty big men. I don't know if they can even fit in there.
I think a Prius, I think it'll look good on the chief with a light on top.
Well, I'll make a deal with you. If you get one, I'll try it next.
Okay. All right. That's fair.
Okay.
Councilman Burmeister here. I got a question for the chief. Is the cameras for the lights, is that in the Capitol, or is that in your budget, or is that in some other budget, or is that not going to happen?
The funding for that comes from 2 sources. One is a state grant, and there's unspent money that's from capital money from a few years back. The holdup we're having is that we're having a difficult time going both through Verizon as well as National Grid to get permission to put these on their poles. To Frank Matula's credit, he's working through those issues. It seems like we just got clearance to put 7 more cameras up. But again, I mean, especially without the city owning its own poles, they're not too happy that they're losing revenue. So they're not exactly playing ball with us.
Yeah, we have to tap, Councilman, we have to tap into the power. And that's where the really big holdup is. And we go through layers and layers of bureaucracy. You know, I'll give you a great example. We mailed checks for, I don't know, a dozen polls 3 months ago, and they say they didn't get them. We give them copies of canceled checks where they cash them. They said they don't know what department within National Grid cashed them. And so it's very laborious, but there is money there, as the chief mentioned, and we're anxious to spend it and get those cameras rolling.
Thank you very much.
Anything else for the chief and his team? Okay, thanks, chief. Next up is benefits.
Thank you.
Benefits, which is on page, starts on page 52. So I just want a caveat. I'd like to put off talking about medical insurance until tomorrow night's meeting. We are meeting with union representatives from both the police and fire department tomorrow, and we're going to have a little more information, and I will be able to explain myself in full at that point. But on page 52, where we start at the middle of the page, general city employment benefits, and we break it up with fire, police, and DPW. We want to mention a couple of things. The retirement. Retirement is up across the board. That's not got anything to do other than with the function of the state measures, values their retirement system on the last day of March, because the state's year end is also March 31st. When it was measured on March 31st of this past year, the stock market had tanked. And so as part of the calculation that goes into what our retirement payment estimate is provided to us by the state comptroller, these are actual estimate bills from the state comptroller. This isn't anything that I go through and figure out, other than the allocation thereof between the general city and sewer and Gulf and URA and UED and sewer. So the retirement bills are just the estimates. They will change by the time we actually get the bill. The actual bill will come in the middle of fall, usually around October, with the payment being paid in December. So I don't know if you have any questions on that per se, but it's really, and I can always share the bills. As it relates to workers' comp, we do not pay workers' comp for police or fire. We do pay those bills directly, medical bills that come through because of injuries on the job. But we do pay workers' compensation for our DPW, our general city employees, and other fund employees, except for city fire and police. As you can see on the bottom of page 52, the workers' comp number has come down dramatically. That is really twofold. It is active participation by Lori Robel, our human resource commissioner, and our controller's office. Dave Short's also actively reviewing every injury that we have. We do a lot of training, but we really pursue these. We want our employees safe, and so we've seen a real reduction in on-the-job accidents, and that's really a credit to the department heads and to Lori Robel and our controller's department. So that's a number that's provided by the county each year, an estimate, and then we just allocate it out based on payroll.
Just wanted to really congratulate you on that. You've actually reduced it by half. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, and that's really due to Dave Short, Lori Robel, Mike Mahoney. So yes.
Well, You taking the leadership on it. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. As it relates to, on page 53, under fire, you see a disability. We have several people that are on 207A. Those are people that have been injured during the line of duty. We pay them directly, and so we put them under that line. So as it relates to benefits, I mean, that until we'll talk about health tomorrow night, if you're okay with that. That's all I have really to add. So I don't know if anybody has any questions on benefits. Okay. Going back to revenues, starting on page 1, as I mentioned, I believe last night, as it relates to property taxes, we're not seeing much of a change in property tax payments. People are pretty much keeping up where they were this time last year in their payments. So we're pretty excited about that, considering so many people have lost their jobs and have had interruptions. And then we move on to other real property tax items. This is pilots. This is shelter rents agreements. I work in conjunction with the Comptroller's office, Brian McCluskey, Chris Tuttle, and our law department. We meet a couple of times a year. We go over possible tax certiorari's, making sure that that whatever is on this list we're actually receiving. The Comptroller's Department audits shelter rents agreements to make sure they pull their audited financial statements to make sure that they're paying us what they owe us. And so we're really pretty active internally as a group with that. I don't know if anybody has any questions as it relates to property taxes and other real property tax items.
Yes. Line item 8402-108-104, 125 Business Park. Now, I noticed we got something, obviously, in 2019, 2020, is why do we have a blank on some of these lines for the proposed 21, 22?
Because they've gone back on the tax rolls.
Okay, so they're not getting a pilot anymore.
Yeah, their pilot's expired, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. In fact, that's part of what we go through, because I ask those questions and I highlight them, and I go down and I take a look at the actual pilot to make sure, number one, they're expired, and number two, that Chris Tuttle, our city assessor, has them back on the tax rolls. So we
can't just delete them from the budget right now, or you have to keep it from 2017?
We have to keep it from 2017.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, on to non-property tax.
I have a general question.
Go ahead, councilperson.
So it looks like I'm on page 1 here, right? So our actual revenue is pretty steady, right? Going up a little bit, even though the tax rate didn't go up. Our actual expense revenue went up a little bit, right? Is that how I'm reading it? Yes.
Yeah, so what happens is we're on what they call a full accrual budget. So what that means is that we accrue everything within the first 3 line items. That fourth line item there where it says prior year's taxes, which sort of as a misnomer, the title of the account, it's just what it is. That kind of encompasses ups and downs. There is a percentage that we set aside for what we believe we will not collect. We need to figure that into our tax calculation. There is also an accounting function where we go through where we only count 60 days after the end of the year collections. And so that number right there, when you see it, it goes up, it goes down. And that's the number out of everything in the budget I can't even fathom estimating. I struggle. And so we look at previous year's historicals to try to gauge that. That's why when I started this conversation, I'm constantly asking how are our collections, because that's going to fall into what that fourth account number is. I don't know if that makes or answers your question.
Okay, here's my general question, and I'm trying to make it as general a question as possible. So we're not going to raise taxes this year, although the actual revenue from taxes is going to pick up a little bit.
Yes.
Right? We're not going to raise taxes, which people like, and yet we've also been talking about all the ways in which we have to pay people more, right? Like standard COLA increases, contractual increases. So, like, how does this balance out in the big picture?
Yep.
Just give me big picture about our cost, the running the city is going to go up, but we're not going to charge more in
Yep.
taxes. How do we do that without
The big-
actually having less
the big
services to the
picture,
people?
really the big picture is that over the past decade, 15 years ago, the city was on fire, physically burning. We had numerous
Right.
foreclosures. We're not seeing that anymore. We're seeing people pay property taxes on time. We're seeing more of that. We're seeing sales tax go up. We're seeing other types, which I'll get into in a second, other types of revenues going up. So when you say, okay, you're increasing your expenses, we often forget we're also seeing our revenues increase. Okay, and that
But from not from city property
that's right.
taxes.
That's right. Exactly.
Okay.
Right. So as we,
So in other words,
if we keep growing,
and I know
if we keep growing, right, and we keep investing, and people want to spend money here, and people want to live here, that's going to help our revenues increase, and that will keep pace, maybe,
Right.
hopefully, with our expenditures, so that we can have a level tax rate. Does that make sense?
Okay, so if I can just recapitulate that and just, so in other words, other revenues are going up enough so that the fact that they are meeting our rising expenses so that we can keep our taxes steady. Is that right?
Yes, it goes back to the other point as it relates to expenditures. I use workers' comp for a great example. We have been very active at pursuing workers' comp, so our expenses are decreasing. You made a statement, our contractuals are going up everywhere. They aren't. Some, I use the police department as the poster child. They keep scrubbing. What can we reduce? What can we get a grant to pay for? So every year, we're constantly trying to reduce and not increase those lines.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Back on page 4 on non-property tax items, we are seeing right now, from what the information that we have, we are on pace to meet our city sales tax revenue budget for the year. We're actually a little above it, so we're excited about that. We still have several months left for revenues to come in to us from the state. We're hoping that number stays, and so that's why we kept the sales tax number where it was. We receive funds from National Grid. We rent out our subway system to them. Time Warner Cable, that's our franchise fee agreements. There again, look at historicals, look where we are now, understanding where we think we're going to be. And the most difficult thing for me this past year to budget has been the departmental income. And as you can see, you try to figure out, we've had a rough year, and where's that year going to be next year? Are people all of a sudden going to flood in and get birth certificates here? Are they going to flood in and now decide they're going to get, dog licenses? What's the reason for the numbers going down? And so the departmental income, I pretty much, other than the ambulance, which I work with Captain Torresano from the fire department, I do touch base with different department heads, but I pretty much came up with these on my own, looking at historicals and kind of understanding, where we are through the year. I will tell you, in speaking with Captain Torresano, head of our EMT cost center, he felt that we were on target with the ambulance revenues. We had dropped some when the pandemic began, but this past year we initiated, at the beginning of the year, we initiated a much more active program of going after those people that don't pay us, and so we're doing additional collection pursuits. And so our numbers have come up slightly because of that. So he predicts, and I can see it on a historical basis, that we're hoping that our ambulance revenues stay right where they are.
Heather, I have a question on that sales tax. What percentage do we get from the county on sales tax?
We get a percent. We get money directly from the state. We get a certain percentage directly from the state, and then there is a percentage that of the 8 3/4% that goes to directly to the county. The county then distributes that based on a couple of inputs. And I don't have it in front of me, but I want to say it's a combination of population and assessments. I'd have to get back to you, Councilman, on that just to be 100% sure. So it isn't just a straight percentage rate.
Right, because here's my understanding is that I know you work for New Hartford, and New Hartford gets more sales tax from the county than Utica does. Now, is that because of the mall and there's more people spending money in New Hartford than Utica? What is do you know why or?
No, I can get you more information on that. I don't. We don't. The county does not provide us with any kind of list as to what they provide the towns and the villages versus us. We simply get a check.
Yeah, I would like that if you can get it. Even the surrounding towns and villages. I'd just like to see where we stand. Since we are the largest city in the county, I believe we should get the largest share of sales tax. But I don't think that's happening. But if you can get some numbers, I would appreciate it.
Yep, I will. Yeah,
I'll bet anything it has to do with Commercial Boulevard.
Well, it has to do with many years ago, the county legislators got together, came up with percentages and ratios based on a number of facts, and came up to an agreement. And that was that was probably 20 years ago. You may recall several years ago, there was a push on for us to give up our preemption. And what that means is we get some of the sales tax directly from the state. We would have given up that ability to get that sales tax and given it to the county. The mayor and the mayor of Rome chose not to do that. That was really the only proposed change. But Councilman, I'll get back to you on an answer on that.
Yes, because 20 years ago, we didn't have many hotels as we do now.
Yep.
We didn't have the auditorium rocking and rolling like we do now. So we are generating a lot of money and income. So I don't know, maybe it's time to look at something like that. I don't know if we can do anything with the county, but maybe we can make a little noise on that. So we'll see.
Okay, I will get you an answer on that. Any questions? Departmentally?
Yeah, I have a question, Heather.
Okay.
What do we have? I'm trying to find where's in the book here. What is our fund balance now? What do we have in our savings account, basically?
Let me just give me a minute here, and I will pull that up. There it goes. Utica. So I'm just pulling up our financial statements. Let me just take a look here.
Mark, do you mean our cash value or our fund balance after the budget?
What do we have left over? I mean, we've been saving money. That's why I want to.
He means the fund balance, which is the rolling balance, which is technically what's referred to as the fund balance every year, I think, Frank.
Yeah.
Heather, it should be around 7.8, something like that. Is that what you're looking up?
A little bit higher. So at the end of March 31st, 2020, our total fund balance. Now that means there's money set aside. Remember, we did a $500,000 accrual for employee separation purposes, but our total fund balance was $8.4 million at the end of March 2020. There's $500,000 restricted for that. There's some other non-spendable that have to do with prepaid expenditures and inventory, but our total unassigned was $7.5 million.
Oh, I'm going to just lead into the next question. So if we had like a $1.5 million bill, something came in or we had to pay it for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be fine because it's not going to break our budget, right? Because we have that money right there in the fund balance, or is this just numbers?
No, and that's a really great question. We've done fairly well this year through the pandemic because we had fund balance, which means we had cash flow. Not all of it's always cash. We're owed money. We owe money. So there's things coming and going from different places. But that is the kind of the compilation of all those things put together. And one of the things in the mayor's budget address he mentioned was, our general fund budget's about 72 million. If you divide that over 12 months, that's about $6 million a month. And the New York State Government Finance Officers Association recommends that you have at least 2 months worth of budget set aside in fund balance. And if you have that, then you should be able to manage a pandemic. So it's really great because our budget, 72 million divided by 12 months is 6 million times 2 months is 12 million. So that's how you can kind of associate, or we're getting closer to where we need to be. I'll give you another example. Up until last year, we weren't making our workers' comp payments timely to the county. And that was simply a function of that when they were requesting the payments, we didn't have the cash to make them. So they were allowing us to pay them late. Last year, prior to the pandemic, right prior to the pandemic, was the first year in probably 15 years that we made our payment on time, which is exciting. It's exciting because we had the cash flow to do it. So when you have that fund balance, maybe not always cash sitting in the bank, but it allows you to make payments on time, make payments early, take advantage of discounts. And that's something we've been able to do the past couple of years. And as you recall, Mark, I mean, you were around when we were short-term borrowing in December to make our retirement bill payments to New York State because we didn't have the cash flow to do it. We haven't had to do that the past 3 years because we had a significant, a significant fund balance, which allowed us to have that cash flow. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Didn't we pay off a lawsuit or something? $750,000. What did we pay off the lawsuit with?
That was paid off, I want to say 2 years ago.
Right, with the fund balance, correct? Or am I right? Am I wrong?
That was actually through a debt service payment, but I don't think it was through fund balance. No.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically I'm trying to get at, if we had like a $1.5 million bill, for some reason, we can survive without no issues, no borrowing, no nothing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so we're kind of protecting ourselves. I remember we had a bond for that one case for $2 million a few years back, and we had a bond for that.
But then the next question is.
What I'm trying to get at, Heather, is though, to echo what kind of Celeste said in a way, I think that's why I heard it, is that, when are we going to start growing the budget a little bit, because expenses are going up. We had a zero this year, we gave back the year before, and then, we had, very lean. One point, I don't think we had any high budgets except for that 1 year. I think it was like a 4.3. And what I'm trying to get at, we go 0, 0, 1, and then all of a sudden we get a 6, then 0, 0, 0, then 5. I think people couldn't understand, you constantly grow the budget by a small percentage every year. I just, to protect us if we ever get in a situation too. So anyways, that's all I was just curious about.
I want to hop in for a second. That's exactly what I was thinking about. I think it's nice to say, hey, guess what, people, no tax increase. Everybody's glad to hear that in the short term, but I, as a tax owner, I wouldn't have a reasonable way to predict how much my taxes will go up year after year. And I think it's reasonable to think that my taxes would tick up at the rate of the cost of increase of expenditure, right? They should more or less, on average, match inflation. It's more expensive every year to the city. Why should I have to take in a little bit more every year? And I'd much rather have my taxes go up that way than be flat and then have a big up, So I think more right on about that.
All right. So I think the mayor agrees with you. Oh, go
Heather,
ahead.
can you explain to them this is a yearly budget, council members, and predicting the cost that happens during this budget, it's an estimate. What Heather puts together is the best estimate she can. Next year, this year we may get hit with billions and millions of dollars of devastation. We don't know. So that means, of course, we would have to pay it for next year's budget. She did a wonderful job. The mayor did a wonderful job.
Can I,
And I
can I
believe very
ask, is everybody
strongly-
having problems hearing now?
I got you. And the problem is that everybody in this city, if we don't have to increase taxes, why would we? This year, we don't. We're able to balance the budget on what we have to work with. Next year, we may have to. So every budget year, if we did a 5-year budget, it'd be a different story. If we did a 10-year budget, it would be a different story. But this year, every year and every municipality has a 1-year budget. That's why we work on 1 year and we find out what we can do for the city taxpayers during this year. Thank you.
Okay, as it relates to intergovernmental charges on page 7, this is receipts that we receive for providing services to other governments, going back to something Councilman DeBrango mentioned last night about possible consolidation of our civil service with the county. You'll see on the last line under intergovernmental charges, we received $50,000 from the school to perform civil service testing for them. That's only available, by the way, to schools that perform the service or utilize the service from cities. It won't go to the county. So those funds are used to some extent reimburse what's going on in human resources. Under use of money and property, this is basically things that we rent out. Another kind of hard area to kind of determine, what we expect to receive. But the bigger ones, the Mohawk Valley Water Authority rent for upstairs, that's stable. Valley View, and of course the solid waste host benefit. On page 8, licenses and permits. Little bit of a change here. As you can see under building permits, we had a very good year in 1920. We also are having a good year this year. That's simply a function of several bigger projects from Globe Mills, Roosevelt Residences, and of course the hospital. We don't see that on the horizon as much for the next coming year, so that's why that number wasn't as high as it is presently for actual. Under fines and forfeitures, been a rough year. Go ahead. Someone had a question?
Yeah, I want to go back to the Valley View. Obviously, we didn't collect. Obviously, it was a pandemic. It wasn't open all year long. Am I right? So we're not going to go after that money.
Oh,
at Valley View.
we may not go after all of it, but he was open. Valley View was open. And so I know
I don't think it would be fair to charge the full amount. I mean, every restaurant.
No, and we aren't. There is a formula based on sales. It's actually based on a couple of different things. And so we have been in contact with him, and we are expecting a check somewhat in the short term.
Okay, I was just curious because there was a blank there that we didn't, up to date was nothing, actual date.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
There was a blank and we didn't collect anything yet, but I was just curious because I know a lot of the businesses are, obviously they're hurting like mad, and I don't think, I think he obviously should get a break. Hopefully you can negotiate something. That's all. Thanks.
Okay. Back to fines and forfeitures on page 8. Numbers are down. They've been historically down. As I mentioned earlier, we had an opening in our parking enforcement / animal control, and that relates to parking fines. But as we know, there was nobody parking downtown. I mean, there was no activity for a good chunk of this year. So I did bring the estimates down. Hopefully we exceed them, but I wanted to be reasonable. As it relates to sale and property and compensation for loss, you see there's a larger number there under sale of real property. We haven't had, just because of the eviction moratorium, we have not had a sale of a recent sale of foreclosed properties or properties that this would consist of properties outside of the URA boundaries. But we do have ownership of a couple of parcels that we look to have a sale of in this next year. That's why that number sits where it sits. As it relates to miscellaneous revenue, these are things that usually come through the year. The Comptroller's office, not quite sure. They don't really meet any of the other categories. Sometimes they're up, sometimes they're down. So I just tried to look at historicals and come up with a reasonable number. Interfund revenues, we didn't make any change as it relates to this. Every couple of years, the city hires an outside independent consultant to come in and do quite an exhaustive study as to what indirect services are provided for various departments, and we use that as a basis as for how we then go in and collect from them. Oneida County revenue, mortgage tax, always a tough one. We just because of the timing from many years ago, we get 2 checks a year. We still haven't received our check for the year, for our first check for the year. They come very late. Nothing that the county's doing. It's the way it was accounted for many years ago. So I tried to come up with an estimate based on historics and also knowing what's going on in the local economy. You will also see codes reimbursement, the $282,000. It was the mayor's, the mayor's advice that we not put that in there and count on that at the moment. I will say we do have an agreement through the end of 2021. We are still performing those services and look forward to hopefully receiving that revenue. As it relates to state revenue, general municipal aid, kind of a long story here. As you can see, the number has been pretty historically, it is. We haven't had a change in many years back to the Hannah days. We received 2 payments, one in September, and our last payment, which is the largest hunk at the end of March. As you may recall, back in April, the legislature gave the power to the state budget director to reduce our payments by up to 20%. About a month ago, the budget director told us that he was only going to be, at the moment, reducing our payments by 5%, not the full 20%, and that we may end up getting that 5% back. Just waiting on state aid. As it relates to the state's proposed budget, they had recommended a 2.5% reduction. Don't know if that's going to stick or not. I don't know where the legislature is on that at the moment. We're kind of in the same ball game with Syracuse, Albany, Buffalo, Yonkers. So we're waiting to hear. So the mayor suggested we leave the number right where it is. And so that's why that number is there.
But they still owe the balance between 16.1 and 45, 4.5, right?
They do if they
with
may
5% less.
Yeah, they may keep the 5%. They're just waiting to see what the feds do.
Heather, do we, just a quick question, do we apply any more funds towards our water and sewer problems, especially the storm sewers this year? Do we apply any additional funds to that this year?
Yeah, you mean in the current year or the next budget year?
This budget year that we're working on now.
Yeah, we had borrowed some money several years ago for work at creeks and ravines, and so we've pretty much expended the majority of that. We did quite a bit of work. I want to say we did close to $250,000 between South Utica, North Utica, Floral Drive, and we've done an awful lot of work. We're waiting to hear if we're going to get any reimbursement from FEMA for some of that. We did receive some money for police and fire overtime as it related to the Halloween storm and the South Utica Sequoia Creek cresting. That was about $30,000 that we received as a reimbursement for their overtime and some of their expenditures. We're still waiting to hear on any kind of reimbursement as it relates to that other $250,000 that we expended. So we did quite a bit of work. And as you may recall from last week, in the discussion with DPW and Mike Mahoney Engineering, we have set aside $200,000 in stormwater funds to be utilized towards projects for this coming year.
I'm just hoping that we can apply as much as possible because all the councilmatic districts need an update in our stormwater and our sewage as much as possible this year, especially this year. So whatever monies that we could on reimbursement, maybe we can help, reinvest also and keep the repairs going as long as possible
Okay.
for all our
Yeah, the
districts.
main thing is
Thank you.
maintenance. You're right. If we could put some money in there to just keep maintaining. I know it's, with all the trees and the brush and whatever is gonna get clogged up these areas. Hopefully we could just use it for maintenance.
Okay, I'll definitely pass that along to the mayor. As it relates to, other state revenue, you can see where I did reduce the court security. I reduced the expense line. I reduced the revenue lines. The rest of it is grants that, once again, will be plugged in from the police department. The only other thing I want to mention on page 11, down near the bottom, the State Youth Bureau, that is reduced. We didn't offer Dick Miller. We didn't offer any youth programs this year. And so that we may receive some funds for the current year, but in talking to Lonnie Jenkins, he suggested we reduce it to about $20,000, just, anticipating that we'll see a reduction in maybe some youth programming. The mayor's hoping to bring all youth programming back, but we're not quite sure. We're just staying tuned on that. If we turn to the next page, page 12, the transfer from CIT. You're probably going to ask me, I should have had it up. I'll look at real quickly here. How much do we have in CIT at the time? And I have that. Let me just find it. I appropriated as much as we were able to appropriate based on the formula set in the charter. And that number is, let's see here, Capital Improvements Trust Fund. We at the beginning of January 1st, 2020, we had $2.7 million. We were going to we budgeted $675,000, which we did not need to bring in because we had sales tax was up, a variety of other revenues were up, so we didn't even have to use that. And we received our deposit from the Water Authority, $480,000. We did use in the 2021 budget, we did a budget to use a little over $1 million. Not sure if we're going to need all of that this year, but taking that back out, the 3/31/2020 balance that we expect to be in there is about $2.2 million. So just based on the calculation that we have to follow, we're permitted to take a little over $1 million from that. That's what we budgeted for. It doesn't mean we have to take it. We're not going to take it if we don't. That's why we've been able to build that fund up a little bit. So that's our goal. If we don't need it, we're not going to take it. We didn't last year, and we're hoping to not have to take it this year. The transfer from the capital fund, I just wanted to show this. That was some of the money that was left over from a previous bond for creeks and ravines. And I wanted to show that money coming in because that's the offset for the stormwater expense. And then appropriation of fund balance. We budgeted for $325,000 coming from fund balance. And that's really an important number because as things are today, I do expect for us to have a slight surplus for the 2021 year. That's because we didn't expend money for crossing guards are my poster child. We didn't expend any money for crossing guards because
So 80,000 right there.
Right. Yeah. If you look at our youth department, which we'll hear more about tomorrow night, we didn't offer any youth programming. We didn't have any lifeguards. We didn't open the pools. So there's quite a bit of savings there. Now, on the flip side, right, that's all the great news. On the flip side, and we got early retirements. Flip side, we didn't have the traffic revenues. We didn't have some of the, our sales tax. I was hoping for it to go up a little bit. Didn't. Our departmental income didn't get what we expected. So there's an offset for that. And so this has been a very peculiar year in trying to figure out where we're going to be. And it will, I'm still fascinated by it all. We won't know the answer to that probably until next fall. But the goal is just at least to meet our budget and to have a slight surplus. That's the goal. So, but I don't know if you have any questions for me as it relates to revenues.
Very good, Heather. Outstanding. Thank you.
I didn't hear you, Mark. What'd you say?
I said that was a very good brief, Heather. I mean, explained a lot and everything else. So, thank you. Very good.
Well, I worked pretty hard. I tried not to have any questions I can't answer. Councilman DeBrango stumped me tonight. He stumped the budget director. I guess that's the game. Stumped the budget director. So I will get you guys the answer on that sales tax.
First time in 3.5 years.
Yeah.
Well, she's Republican. What do you expect?
Thank you.
Thank you. You did a great
Job
job.
well done, Heather. Thank you.
Heather, thank you. We're all set for tonight, Heather? We all set? Want to sum it up?
Yes, and we will
Okay.
cover health insurance tomorrow night.
All right, council
Thank
members,
you.
our next budget will be tomorrow at 4:30 again. We will be looking at the fire, purchasing, assessment, youth borough, codes, and corporate council, and also IT. Can I have a motion to close?
Councilman Beatrice.
Durango second.
Thank you. Motion carried. Council members, have a great night.
Catch you guys later.
Thank you.
Michael, thank you very much.